All right, I'm back with another 2019 team preview and prediction. We're rolling right along here on YouTube. I don't know, what is this, the 9th or 10th one, something like that. So only 40 or 50 more to go, but we're doing these previews right up until the start of the college football season, which this year, of course, is August 24th. Handful of games that day in the so-called week 0 of college football, capped off that night with, of course, the big Florida versus Miami game down in Orlando. Done some teams from every single conference. Up right now, the Big Ten, we're going to take a look at the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Hey, good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you again on YouTube today. So thanks for watching, I really appreciate it. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year, and about half of them are watchable. That's up to you to decide which half that is and in which category this particular video falls into. Slap a thumbs up on this video too. It doesn't take you any time, it doesn't cost you anything, but it's a huge help to me. So if you enjoy this preview, if you've enjoyed this series of previews, if you appreciate what we're doing here on the channel, give this video a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Shout out to Kendall J over on the Uncle Lou Patreon page. He requested this Nebraska preview and prediction video. So Kendall, thank you, sir. I really appreciate you supporting the channel over there on the Patreon page. I hope you enjoy this preview and prediction video of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. If you want to sign up on the Uncle Lou Patreon page, just click the link in the description of this video that says support the channel. It'll take you over there. Get yourself signed up. Let me know which team you want to see me preview, and I'll make sure to get it done sometime over the next few weeks. Scott Frost, year 2. Ding, ding, ding. I mean, they're automatically going undefeated, right? I don't know about that. I do like Scott Frost. He's definitely got Nebraska going in the right direction, and I'll get into the reasons why I think that is here in a minute. Disappointing first year. I mean, there's no real way to sugarcoat it, but, you know, Central Florida may have been in better shape when Scott Frost got there than Nebraska was when he got there. Just a lot of issues at Nebraska over the last 10 years, some boneheaded coaching hires that really set them back. I like Scott Frost. I think he will turn Nebraska into a serious contender in the Big Ten. We'll see if he's got the pieces and the parts that he needs to do that this year, but let's do what we normally do. We're going to recap last year for Nebraska, then we'll take a look at who they lost, who they got coming back for 2019, and then we'll put the schedule up on the screen and I'll give you a winner and loser for every single game. All right, how'd it go year 1 for Scott Frost at Nebraska? Not good, 4-8. Not many people saw that coming. They were a 4-win team the year before, fired a coach, brought Scott Frost in, expectations were high. I tried my best to tamper some of those expectations for Nebraska fans. I just had a feeling it was going to be a rough first year. I didn't think it was going to be this rough, though. 4-8, really no excuse for that. Started out terrible. Was it the first game of the year was canceled, right? A storm or something like that. You then proceeded to lose your next 6 games, starting 0-6. Unacceptable. Losses to Colorado, Troy, Michigan, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Northwestern right off the jump. Some of those are understandable, right? Some of them you got to scratch your head. Colorado was not a good team. They fired their coach last year. Troy has no business competing with Nebraska. Troy was a good team for the classification that they're in, and yes, we know they beat LSU a couple of years ago. That was embarrassing too. You shouldn't have lost that game. Michigan, that's understandable. Purdue, an up and down team. Rondale Moore, one of the best players in the Big Ten, but let's be real, you're Michigan, they're Purdue. You got to get to the point where you're beating Purdue on a regular basis before the majority of college football fans are going to start taking you seriously. That's not a shot at Purdue. I'm just letting you know where Purdue falls in the pecking order of the Big Ten. If you're below them, you're not in a very good spot. If you're above them, maybe you got a chance to do something. You got to turn that around. Wisconsin had a disappointing year, but probably a better team overall than Nebraska. And Northwestern, of course, exceeded everyone's expectations last year. So not necessarily an embarrassing loss there, but still 0-6 is 0-6, no matter how you slice it or dice it. You then went on to lose 2 games later in the season to Ohio State and Iowa, but you did turn it around somewhat in the later part of the season. I mean, you started 0-6, you finished 4-8, right? So you went 4-2 in your last 6 games. You ended up rescheduling the canceled game from week 1 with a different team, Bethune-Cookman, I think it was. And you had a couple of pretty good wins towards the end of the year. Minnesota is a good team and one of the best coached teams in the Big Ten. Why is PJ Fleck still at Minnesota? No one knows. Get out of there, sir. Get you a real job. You're never going to accomplish anything meaningful there unless you think 9-3 and second in the division is meaningful. And then you beat Michigan State. Michigan State had a weird year last year. Expectations there this year. But anyway, so those were two pretty good wins. You also beat, like I mentioned, Bethune-Cookman and Illinois. What did I have Nebraska doing last year, just as a reference point of how stupid I am? I'll put the ending screen of last year's Nebraska preview up, and we'll see how I did. Well, I had you going 6-6, didn't I? Yeah. Too many differences to run through and name here. You can see the teams that I thought you were going to beat versus the teams we went over that you actually did beat. But there you go. I had you at 6-6. So you came up a couple of games short of my expectations. Let's see how you can do this year versus the Uncle Lou expectations. Scott Frost, year 2. Quarterback Adrian Martinez. Those are the two things everyone knows, is talking about, and considers huge positives for Nebraska. Now, there are some negatives, and we'll get to those. But first, let's talk about quarterback Adrian Martinez. Some players in the Big 12 have compared him to Patrick Mahomes. Of course, he came from the Big 10. No, Big 12, I'm sorry. There's a transfer player. It doesn't matter. Point is, he's getting comparisons to Patrick Mahomes. Do I think he has a chance to be as good as Patrick Mahomes, like on an NFL level? I'm not convinced of that. But the point is, people consider him to be the same type of player and athlete. We'll see. Listen to this, though. He averaged 295 yards per game last year. Now, obviously, that's high. You know that just off the top of your head. But do you know how high that is? 295 yards per game. That is a school record for Nebraska. We're talking about a team that dominated college football for a long time with a nearly unstoppable ground game. Nebraska has, in my opinion, one of the greatest teams in the history of college football back in, was it mid-90s sometime when they won that national title and beat everybody by 50 points. No one's ever had 295 yards a game for Nebraska. Adrian Martinez shattered that record. If he can stay healthy, he's going to have an amazing year, period. He is the perfect quarterback for a Scott Frost system. Scott Frost really got lucky. You see a lot of coaches take new jobs at schools, and when they have a specific philosophy or style of offense that they're looking to run, it is paramount that they get the right QB in there. And I can name tons of examples. Chip Kelly and UCLA. Until he gets a quarterback that can do what he wants to do, they're not going to do anything relevant. Auburn and Gus Malzahn. He has an elite quarterback who completely understands what Gus Malzahn wants to do. They win 10-plus games and challenge for division titles. If they don't, they struggle around a 7-8 win mark. Scott Frost got extremely lucky getting Adrian Martinez year 1 at Nebraska. He was a true freshman last year, sophomore this year. He's got to stay healthy. That is, if you're going to pick out one key to Nebraska's success in 2019, obviously it's the health and production of Adrian Martinez. I expect him to have a huge year. Running back situation, you need a lot of help. Maurice Washington. I talked a lot about this earlier in the offseason when I did a spring preview of Nebraska. I'm not going to get into the whole story here, but basically, when he was in high school, he was dating a girl. There was a video of her doing sexual things, right? They broke up. He went off to college. A couple of years went by. They started talking again. He sent her the video of herself, right? He then was arrested for basically child pornography. Now, is this guy a pedophile or a predator? No. Should he have done that? Probably not. It's still up in the air right now. He's been charged with a couple of things. We just had media days here. Of course, they asked Scott Frost all about this guy, and he just says they're in a wait-and-see approach. They don't really know how it's going to go. They really need him. They're hurting at the running back position. Right? You lose your guy from last year. This guy's name, Ozigbo. Sorry about pronouncing it wrong, but again, I'm not the one who invented that spelling. He's gone. He went over 1,000 yards last year. You got to replace him. Without Maurice Washington, you're left with transfer Dedrick Mills and freshman, what's this guy's name? Ramir Johnson. You just don't know what you're going to get. I don't care how highly recruited a guy is until he gets into college and does something on a Saturday. It's hard to put a whole lot of stock or faith in him. You're going to need help at the running back position this year. Wide receiver, you lose another great one. 1,000-yard receiver Morgan, he's gone, right? Spielman comes back. He might have got 1,000 yards last year, too. I think he got an injury at some point in the season and had to miss a game or a couple of games, and he probably would have gone over the 1,000-yard mark, too. So he's a legit wide receiver. You get him back. But after that, it's not a good situation at wide receiver. You have a walk-on that if he doesn't start, is probably going to get a lot of playing time. This what's his name, Cade Warner, not good. You better hope you got some young guys there that can step up, because you, again, just like running back, you're going to need some help at the wide receiver position. Tight end, Jack Stahl, good, not great, above average. He can catch the ball, he can run routes. He's an okay blocker. He'll get the job done at tight end, but it's nothing that's going to blow you away. Offensive line, sort of a work in progress. It did improve last year as the season went along, and that was sort of the story of Nebraska's season, right? They looked really, really bad the first half of the season, and they looked not great, but a whole lot better the second half of the season than they did the first half, and the same is true for the offensive line. You get Brandon James back, that's good. He's at left tackle. You moved him from right tackle to left tackle. So we'll see. He's pretty much the only known commodity in terms of being good to great. He's a good one. The other one, it's a work in progress. You may see some pieces move around the first couple of weeks of the season. On defense, atrocious. You got to get a lot better. I'm sorry, your defense was pitiful last year. You allowed the third most yards at 433 yards per game, and the third most points at 31.3 points per game. Not in the last 10 years, not in the last 20 years, not in the last 50 years, since 1946. Most yards per game, most points per game since 1946. If you can't get that turned around, it doesn't matter what Adrian Martinez does. You got to play a whole lot better on defense. Can you? Well, defensive line experience, but you don't really have a superstar there, in my opinion. I do like your nose tackle. Is it Daniels? He comes in from Oklahoma State. He'll be okay. Inside linebacker, Barry led your team in tackles last year. You get him back, he's sort of the leader of your defense. On the outside, you got this JoJo Dahman. And what's the other guy's name? He can play safety too, but he plays on the outside, pass rusher. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Cornerbacks, your defensive backfield, just in general, experience back there, but they didn't play well last year. Not a lot of turnovers, not a lot of interceptions. You got this Jackson and Boodle at corner. The rest back there really is unproven. You're going to have to get, it's sort of a theme. Listen, when you go 4-8, it's not really that big of a surprise that you got a lot of position groups that need to improve drastically, right? And that's sort of what you have. The potential is there, especially on offense, to have a breakout year. The defense, you may have to score a lot of points to win a lot of your games. We'll see. Anyway, recruiting-wise, 23rd, 18th. The last 2 years, which of course were Scott Frost's class. The first one, sort of his class. He was hired in December or whatever, so didn't get a full recruiting deal. He get early signing day in December, late signing day in February, so only a couple of months to build that class. But 23 and 18, that's an improvement over where they've been in years past. 23 to 30 range is generally where they've been recruiting before Scott Frost got there. All right, let's put the schedule up on the screen. We're going to do this the same way we always do it. Go through it game by game. I'm going to let you guys know win, loss for every single game. Where are the wins? Where are the losses? Can they improve on 4 and 8? Can they make a bowl game? Can they challenge for the West? Some people think so. Let's find out. All right, week 1 at home, South Alabama. You got to hope this one doesn't get canceled, because you got to assume this is going to be a win. This is going to be very important to Nebraska this year, I think, in my opinion, to start off on the good foot. Having started 0-6 last year. And really, that's a testament, I think, to Scott Frost and the juniors and seniors on that team last year. You start 0-6, it's real easy to just mail it in the rest of the season. What really are you playing for at that point? To go 4-2 down the stretch after starting 0-6, that showed me something. But you don't want to do that again this year, obviously. So South Alabama, I'm going to give you a win. You got to come out that game ready to go. Week 2, you go on the road at Colorado. This is a team that beat you last year that's in the category of you got to start winning those games if you want people to take you seriously. I mentioned them having a new coach this year. He comes from Georgia, actually, defensive coordinator Mel Tucker. They've got one of the best wide receivers in all of college football. This Shoutout or Renault, whatever his name is. He's 6'6" or whatever. He'll be the fastest guy on the field. Can jump out of the building. Makes every catch. He's unbelievable. He'd be a first-round pick in the NFL without question. You don't have anybody that can cover him. I can tell you that right now. Even though 2 guys you got coming back at corner, good luck. You better figure out a way to double that guy or something. I just refuse to believe that Colorado in the first year under a new program is going to beat Scott Frost in year 2. I'm giving you a win on the road at Colorado. All right, you come back home, take on another lower classification school in NIU. A winnable game. You could easily be 3-0 here. What a difference a year would make if you started out 3-0 this year versus staring down that 0-6 start from last year. You can win this game. There's no reason you can't win this game. If you don't start 3-0, the highest expectations that people have for Nebraska this year will not be met. If you can't beat South Alabama, Colorado, and NIU and start 3-0, you're not going to be able to beat enough of these teams later in your schedule to potentially win the West, which is what some people have pegged Nebraska to do. I've got you at 3-0, though. That brings it to your first conference game on the road at Illinois. If you could pick any team in the Big Ten to start your conference slate off with, knowing you had to play them on the road, is there a better team you could pick than Illinois? They're terrible. You ask people to name all the teams in the Big Ten, a lot of them forget that Illinois is even there. You should go on the road, week 4, get a Big Ten win, and you'll be sitting at the end of the first month of college football at 4-0. All right, here's where it starts to get tricky, right? You're starting off 4-0. It's a way better start than you had last year, but you got some tough games coming up here, starting off with your 5th game at home against Ohio State. Now, this is going to be a theme you're going to see as we run through this schedule. The majority of your bigger games against your tougher opponents are at home. If you can pull off a couple of home upsets this year, which is what I think it's going to take, I think you could win the Big Ten West. Ohio State. Everything hinges on Justin Fields, in my opinion, in terms of Ohio State and their goals and expectations, which, of course, is a Big Ten title and a playoff berth. Unfortunately for Nebraska, even if Justin Fields is just an average quarterback year 1 under Ryan Day's system, I think they're going to find a way to beat you. I'm not all that high on Ohio State. I am high on Nebraska. Winning is a learned behavior, and I just don't think, if this game is close into the 4th quarter, I just would trust the juniors and seniors on Ohio State's team to pull it together and eke one out more than I would trust the upperclassmen on Nebraska to do the same. I have you dropping your first game of the year at home to Ohio State. All right, it doesn't get a whole lot easier the week after that, other than the fact that you get to stay at home, but you host Northwestern. This is one of those games that you have to win that I don't think most people really would be expecting you to win. Northwestern is a really good team. They're really well coached. You get them at home. You can't let Ohio State beat you twice here. I have a feeling you'll lose that Ohio State game. You can't get down. You can't beat yourself up. You can't let that loss drag into the next week and cost you this Northwestern game. I'm going to give you a home win here against Northwestern. This is one of those 50-50 toss-up type games that could go either way. You got to start winning some of those against what people consider to be the lower half overall of the Big Ten. You know, you got your Ohio States, your Michigan States, your Penn States, your Wisconsins, and you sort of got everybody else. You got to start beating the everybody else's. Starting at home with Northwestern, I'll give you the win. Then you go on the road to Minnesota. PJ Fleck, great coach. They've got some talent. Some people have them as a dark horse to contend for a division. I think they get you on the road here. Again, winning is a learned behavior. You see this a lot of times with talented, young, inexperienced teams who aren't used to winning a lot of games. They lose a lot of games. I don't think you'll lose a lot, but I do think this is a case here where, you know, if you guys played 10 times, you'd probably each win 5. You'd probably go 5-5. You got to play them there. I'm going to give you your second loss of the season on the road at Minnesota. All right, and then finally, you have your first bye week of the year. You get 2 bye weeks. It would have been nice to have this bye week maybe a couple of weeks earlier, right? Maybe before that Ohio State game, even before the Northwestern or the Minnesota game. If you could have that bye week between maybe Northwestern and Minnesota, maybe that gives you a better chance against Minnesota. But bye week is where it is. You get 2 this year. It's not a change of college football. It's just the way the calendar falls. In order to get the schedule to start where they want it to and end where they want it to, there's an extra Saturday in there. So this is your first bye week. Takes you into another home game, this time against Indiana. Indiana, one of those teams, not very good, struggles to make a bowl game most years, but either beats or scares a team almost every year that you don't see coming. Some close games with Ohio State, for example. Again, you get them at home. Your home schedule, if you could find a way to only lose 1 home game this year, I think that would be a modern-day miracle. In order for that to happen, because I already have you with a loss to Ohio State, you'd have to beat Indiana. I'm going to give you the win. All right, then you go on the road to Purdue, which is another tough spot, I think. Rondale Moore, one of the most exciting players in all of college football, one of the best players in the Big Ten. Purdue, another one of those teams that seems to hover around the middle of the pack in the Big Ten. Never terrible, never great, seems to always be somewhere in the middle. Does that sound familiar, Nebraska fan? Again, This is one of those teams that you got to start beating on a regular basis. I don't see it happening here. I think Purdue catches you and you get yet another loss. All right, your second bye week after that, give you a chance to recuperate from that Purdue game before a big home game against Wisconsin. And you know what? I'm going to give you a win here against Wisconsin. I think you'll look back at this season when it's over and circle that Wisconsin game as one of the biggest wins of your season, sort of a Scott Frost's first sort of marquee win of his career at Nebraska. It wouldn't surprise me if you're not ranked before this game, if you get ranked after that game somewhere in the top 25. A lot of people have you in the top 25 in a preseason. You may fall out if you drop a couple of these earlier games, but I think by this point in the season, if you're not already in the top 25 or back into the top 25, I think you will be at this point. I'm going to give you a big win over Whiskey. All right, at Maryland. Maryland's an up and down team. They've got some talent. Again, Purdue, Northwestern, Minnesota, Indiana. These are all the same teams with different helmets on. I'm going to give you a win at Maryland. Not only that, I'm going to give you a win against Iowa the last week of the season in a game that could be sort of like a playoff game for who wins that division. I'm going to give you the win over Iowa. That puts you at, well, how many losses did I give you? Three or four? I had you at 4-0. You lost to Ohio State. You lost to Minnesota. You lost to Purdue. That puts you at 9-3 with wins over Iowa and Wisconsin. That will probably get you to the Big Ten title game. That's my official prediction for 2019 for Nebraska. I think you go 9-3. I think you win the division and make it to the Big Ten title game before getting waxed by whoever you happen to play. I don't think you'll be ready for that big of a stage this early in the Scott Frost run at Nebraska. But I'm going to go out on a limb here. It's no fun to just pick the favorites, right? Oh, Wisconsin or Iowa, Ohio State or Michigan. You just pick them every year. Yeah, and it's just no fun to do. I think you turn it around this year. 40% of college football teams, listen to this. Shout out to Mark Rogers. I got this from listening to him talk about it. 40% of college football teams in any given year either win more than 3 games than they did the year before, or they lose 3 games less than they won the year before. In other words, there's a 3-game swing in 40% of the teams in college football. Nebraska, you're one of those teams for 2019. You go from 4 wins to 9 in year 2 under Scott Frost, winning your division and securing a spot in the Big Ten title game. All right, that's it. I appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to thumbs up this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again real soon. Have a great morning.